Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining the flu swabbing scheme webinar. I will aim to keep this within 20 to 30 minutes with some time for a Q&A session straight after. If you are dialed in over the phone, you won't be able to see this presentation that I'm currently sharing on the screen. We will record these sessions and make a copy available to all practices. Sorry, I think I can hear a bit of an echo, so if you've got me on speaker or if you've got your microphone on, can you please mute it? Thank you. Brilliant. Now, the aim of this webinar is to cover a bit of a background of the study, the requirements and processes, and any problems that you might encounter during the study. As some of you already know, this study is a collaboration between us and Public Health England, and now has been running for over 50 years. And it runs usually from the beginning of October until the end of May. The study is important as it assists Public Health England in national surveillance of flu, which includes monitoring the flu virus over the course of the season, establish vaccine effectiveness each season, and contribute to the decision-making regarding what candidate vaccine virus to include in the new season of the flu vaccine. Now, this slide just covers a bit of gist of the study. So every year we've got around 100 practices that participate in this study. Practices take nasopharyngeal swabs from any patients that are clinically suspected of having flu-like illness and send them to the Public Health England lab. The lab then tests these samples for the presence of flu, and all of the results from the samples are sent back to the practices, which need to be coded into patient record. Now, I will cover coding in the next few slides. We also receive the results from the lab, which we use to match from the pseudonymized data that we receive from your practice weekly. Now, this slide just covers what the swabbing kits contain. The lab has informed me that you should receive the swabbing kits by the 3rd of October, so next week on Thursday. You can start swabbing as soon as you receive the kits. You will receive the swabs, the viral transport medium. Please refrigerate this as soon as you receive it. This comes in a small box that's the size of a lunchbox and shouldn't take too much space in your fridge. You'll also receive sticky labels and packaging, which includes pre-labeled envelopes. You will also receive electronic copies of materials from us. So this will include a copy of the poster. Please display this at your practice. You will also receive printed copies of the swabbing form with your kits that you receive next week. However, we will send you a template to complete this electronically. Please use this as it will save you quite a bit of time. We will also send you a bookmark with all the codes that you might need. I will cover a bit more on this later. All of these materials that you need will also be available for you to download from your personalized dashboard. Now, there are 4 categories of patients that are eligible for a swab. These include children who are 5 years and under showing symptoms of acute respiratory tract infection, children who are 17 and under who are showing symptoms of influenza-like illness, any older adults who are 65 and over who are showing symptoms of influenza-like illness, and any patients who are in the risk group, such as if they're pregnant or if they've got COPD or diabetes, who are coming into the practice with symptoms of influenza-like illness. We recommend sampling up to 20 samples a week, ideally 5 from each of these 4 categories, although I do realize that you might not see these numbers at the start of the flu season. I have heard recently from practices that they're seeing a few cases recently. However, please feel free to sample, please feel free to oversample actually from children and older adults, so anyone under 17, under 5, and anyone 65 and over. Please feel free to oversample, as we never receive enough samples in these age groups. Now, you can oversample, you can sample from patients who are not in these 4 categories, we will still pay practices for these samples. However, we would like the majority of the samples to come from these 4 categories, as it forms part of our flu vaccine effectiveness study. So we would like the majority of the samples to come from anyone who would have been eligible to receive the flu vaccine. Now, in terms of coding, please make sure that you code swab from nasopharynx taken for virology. Obviously, this depends on the clinical system that you're using. I do realize some practices are moving over to SNOMED and some are still using the old codes. This varies from system to system. However, please make sure these codes are put into patient record. So 4J3H into patient record every time you sample if you're an EMIS practice. Additionally, please code nasopharyngeal swab for virology received or 41G1 once you have received your results back from the lab. You will also need to code any results from the lab back into patient record, including any negative results. We do have, this is just some of the codes, we do have a bookmark with all the codes that you might need in our welcome pack. Please note that the swab taken and received and results must be coded into patient record for payment, as we can't claim funding from our funders for any uncoded samples. Now, I'm sure you all do this already, but this is just a reminder to code any symptoms of fever, cough, shortness of breath, or wheezing. So this would be any code relating to these 4 symptoms that you think is appropriate. Our searches are actually designed to pick up these codes. I will just briefly cover how to swab. Now, please, every time a patient comes into your practice with acute symptoms of influenza-like illness or acute respiratory tract infection, please take a nasal swab and a swab from the throat or pharynx. You only need to verbally consent the patient. Please break both of the swabs. The swabs have a breaking point on them, and put them into the same viral transport medium bottle. I do realize this picture shows only one swab, however, both swabs need to go into the same bottle. Add the labels onto this bottle and package this up with the swabbing form. Please use the electronic template so it'll be quicker to have all the information on the swabbing form, and send it to the lab via the postage material provided. Now, this is just standard Royal Mail post. Please don't put it into the post that's going to your local trust lab for any test. This is a separate post via Royal Mail. We have a video of how to swab available on the dashboard, and additionally, we will also pay £5 per sample that is tested and coded into patient record. Now, this slide just gives you an overview of the requirements of the study, so please feel free to print this page for a quick reference. So please swab from eligible patients. So these are the 4 categories that I've discussed in the previous slides. However, as mentioned before, if you do see a patient who isn't in the 4 categories and shows acute symptoms of influenza-like illness, you can swab them. We will pay practices for these samples. However, we would like the majority of the samples coming from the 4 eligible patient categories. Now, this is the most important thing for this study, is to make sure that the patients you sample from have acute illness. So please only sample from patients who have started showing symptoms of influenza-like illness or acute respiratory tract infection in the past 7 days. Now, so the onset of the symptoms need to be within 7 days. This is because the lab test is less accurate if you sample from any patient showing symptoms for more than 7 days. Now, another thing to keep in mind is the date of the flu vaccination. The lab test would give us a false positive if the patient has had a flu vaccine within 14 days of sampling. So please don't sample from patients who have recently had a flu vaccine. Please make sure you code all symptoms, the diagnosis, and the swab taken. If you do forget to code a result, that's all right. We will get back to you. I always say to practices that forgetting to code the lab result is a reversible error. However, sampling from a patient with onset of symptoms for more than 7 days, or someone who's recently had a flu vaccine, is more of an irreversible error, and we can't pay practices for such samples. Please do not a sample from an opted out patient, as we cannot extract data from such patients and will be unable to link any sample results to a patient record within our database. So we won't be able to claim funding from the funders for any patient data that we can't provide to them for the flu vaccine effectiveness. However, in saying that, if an opted out patient does agree to be swabbed, you can add an overriding code into their patient record if they consent to it. If you do use the electronic template, it will not only save you time, it will actually flag you any opted out patients as well, and also code the sample taken for you into patient record. Now, the other thing that the lab flagged to us was that a lot of samples leaked in transit and had to be discarded. So please make sure that you close the lids on tight, as we cannot pay practices for any untested samples, and we would like to reimburse practices for their time and effort. We do have a dashboard available to all participating practices, so you please check your dashboard where you can monitor the number of samples taken and order any kits if you run out. You can email me this as well if you need any more kits, whatever works best for you. Now, the next two slides just cover common problems that I've covered previously. It's just a reiteration. The lab does receive a lot of samples from patients who've recently had a flu vaccine or whose date of onset are over 7 days. So please do not sample from such patients. Now, the other thing to note is to make sure that the date of collection, sorry, my mouse isn't working, the date of collection and the date of onset are completed on the swabbing form, because the lab discards of any samples that don't have this information, and we can't pay practices for any untested samples. Again, as mentioned previously, please do not sample from any opted out patients, as we can't link it to a patient record. Now, you can monitor the number of samples taken in your personalized dashboard. You will also be able to order more materials and monitor your flu vaccine uptake throughout the season. We will send you a unique link and practice key for your dashboard in a separate email. Now, some of our practices who have participated in this study for years have shared a few ideas with us. We know that some of our larger practices run flu swabbing clinics to incorporate this study into their workflow during the winter season. And some practices have also used a cooler bag in their consultation room to keep the viral transport medium cold without having to run back and forth from the nearest fridge every time they see an eligible patient. I had another session this afternoon where a practice mentioned that they prepare their kits in advance and place the swabs and packaging materials all into the envelope. So when they see an eligible patient, all they need to do is grab the viral transport medium, print off the swabbing form, and package and send. So if you do have any ideas or steps that you've taken to incorporate this study into your workflow, please do let me know, and I will share it with all practices. With that, I think I've covered everything that I needed to cover. I am ready for any questions that you might have. If you don't have a microphone, you can type out any questions that you have, and I'll be able to see them and answer them.